Sun Tzu argues that an army's invincibility is grounded in its defensive capacity, and the ability to prevent vulnerabilities can be exploited by the enemy. He claims that defense is not a weak stance, but an active and intelligent strategy to retain strength, force the enemy to make mistakes, and wait for the right moment to attack. Sun Tzu asserts that an invincible army is one which gives the enemy no opportunity to attack it successfully. In short, the commander must anticipate the enemy's intentions and position himself in such a way as to counteract them before they become a threat. Defense is the cornerstone of invincibility, as it protects resources and preserves the army's strength. A well-positioned army compels the enemy to attack in disadvantageous conditions, expending its own resources and energy, while the defending army stays in a strong position. If the army is in a well-prepared defensive position, the enemy is pushed to attack, exposing himself to errors and vulnerabilities. This wear and tear may be exploited by the defending army to strike back at a moment of enemy weakness. Sun Tzu suggests that invincibility through defense is tied directly to having patience. He implies that a commander must remain on the defensive until a clear opportunity to attack successfully arises. Strategically waiting is essential for battlefield success. The Chinese Great Wall, built over several centuries and by various dynasties, is one of the most ambitious defensive strategies in history, conceived to protect Chinese territory from the constant invasions of nomadic tribes such as the Xiongnu and the Mongols. Formed by several connected fortifications, watchtowers, and military garrisons, the wall not only functioned as a physical barrier, but also as an early warning system that allowed Chinese troops to mobilize rapidly against imminent threats. While not completely impenetrable, the Great Wall forced invaders to waste considerable resources and energy, either trying to overcome or circumvent it. The wall also offered a psychological advantage, symbolizing the determination and resilience of the Chinese state. This towering structure not only physically shielded China, but also dissuaded attacks, forcing invaders to reckon with whatever the gains were worth the effort and sacrifices required to overcome it. In World War I, the trench system became an example of defensive invincibility, profoundly altering the ways in which battles were fought. Each side built vast networks of trenches along the Western Front, spanning hundreds of kilometers from the English Channel to Switzerland. These entrenchments included multiple defensive lines, with fortified firing positions, underground shelters, and troop movement corridors, making them almost impenetrable to head-on attacks. This defensive approach rendered it extremely difficult for any side to make a significant breakthrough without suffering catastrophic losses. The trenches were shielded by barbed wire, minefields, and expertly placed machine guns, which mowed down the attacking troops before they could reach the enemy positions. The terrain between the trenches, known as no man's land, was ravaged by constant bombardment, which made it even lethal for anyone who tried to cross it. This kind of stalemate forced commanders to reconsider their strategies, leading to the development of new weapons and tactics, including tanks, poison gas, and air bombardment, to break the deadlock. But the trench system remained a dominant feature of the war until its end. The Red Army adopted a strategic defensive approach inside the city at the Battle of Stalingrad, turning the urban terrain into a true resistance camp. Stalingrad's geography, with its shattered buildings, narrow streets, and rubble, was used by the Soviets to neutralize the German advantage in weaponry and open-field combat tactics. The Soviet forces took up positions in fortified locations, such as factories, residential buildings, and underground, pushing the Germans to fight in extremely harsh and unpredictable conditions. This sort of urban combat quickly depleted the resources and morale of the German army, who struggled to marshal their forces and maintain their supply lines. Each German breakthrough cost enormous human and material losses, given that the Soviets, with their carefully planned defensive posture, took advantage of the terrain to carry out ambushes, sneak attacks, and ongoing resistance. The intense fighting depleted the German energy, allowing the Soviets to reorganize their forces and gather reinforcements. When the Germans were worn down and sufficiently vulnerable, following months of unrelenting battles and no considerable progress, the Red Army unleashed a decisive counteroffensive known as Operation Uranus. This maneuver consisted of coordinated attacks on the flanks of the German forces, where less experienced and ill-prepared troops from their Axis allies were stationed. The operation surrounded the German 6th Army inside Stalingrad, cutting it off from the rest of the Axis forces. This encirclement, together with sheer exhaustion and lack of supplies, resulted in the German surrender, scoring one of the biggest military defeats of the Second World War and a crucial turning point in the conflict. Sun Tzu emphasizes that mastering pace and initiative is essential for success in any conflict. In his view, the ability to shape the battle conditions, such as its timing and location, provides a significant strategic advantage. An army that keeps pace forces the enemy to react, losing its ability to act proactively. The notion is related to Sun Tzu's principle that war is an art of handling and controlling the scenario to ensure superiority without relying on force alone. Sun Tzu affirms that the surest way to maintain the initiative is to force the enemy to respond to one's actions. It puts the adversary in a defensive position, preventing them from implementing their plans. A reactive army is often at a loss, as it fights at the pace dictated by the opponent. A well-prepared army can anticipate the enemy's movements and adjust its actions accordingly. Readiness is not only a protection, but also a way of setting up situations in which the enemy is forced to act rashly or at a disadvantage. Sun Tzu proposes that the battle pace should be dictated by the army that has the upper hand. Switching between rapid attacking movements and strategic calm spells can disorientate the enemy, keeping them on edge and unable to anticipate the next moves. When the enemy is constantly forced to react, they are prone to making mistakes and becoming unruly. Sun Tzu instructs that the commander must take advantage of these baffling moments to inflict decisive damage. Sun Tzu explains the importance of being the first on the battlefield. This means positioning one's forces advantageously before the enemy arrives, thereby allowing one to control the combat conditions. He also instructs how fundamental it is to adapt to the enemy's actions while retaining the initiative, making them fight on your terms and at the pace you set. The 1704 Battle of Blenheim provides an example of controlling pace and initiative in war. During the War of Spanish Succession, the Duke of Marlborough conducted a surprise 100-kilometer march to strategically position himself on the Danube, stunning the Franco-Bavarian forces. Marlborough dictated the pace by forcing the French to slow down and react to his maneuvers. He resorted to swift and unpredictable attacks to break up the enemy, capitalizing on loopholes in their defenses. He divided the enemy's efforts in battle, isolating their forces and compelling them to fight at a disadvantage. This approach led to a decisive victory, shattering the French and Bavarian position in Central Europe and providing the effectiveness of strategic control of pace and initiative on the battlefield. The German Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, was an example of controlling pace and initiative during the Second World War. This German strategy involved combining rapid, highly coordinated attacks between infantry, armor, and aviation to disrupt the enemy before it could react. The Germans struck in a concentrated manner, cutting through defensive lines and rapidly advancing inland, breaking down communications and destabilizing the enemy command. This forced their opponents to respond in a fragmented manner, preventing them from organizing effective defenses. The Blitzkrieg was instrumental in the Polish and French campaigns, enabling quick and dramatic victories that brought Germany to a dominant position in Europe in the early years of the war. Napoleon Bonaparte was an expert in managing the battle pace through his movement warfare strategy. He used fast and precise movements to isolate parts of the enemy army, forcing his opponents to react to his maneuvers rather than carrying out their own plans. His talent for splitting up enemy forces and attacking each segment individually allowed him to overcome numerically superior armies. This was crucial in victories such as Ulm and Jena Auerstedt, where his skill at dictating the pace and harnessing the enemy's disorganization further solidified his reputation as one of the greatest strategists in military history.